Hello, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and every week or so I write a newsletter all about the future of podcasting, and this is it being read out a little bit after the event, but still, there we are. And this is called The End of Open as Audio Goes Exclusive. The BBC announced it's to trial a windowed removal of open podcasts, making some radio-derived podcasts exclusive for 28 days within the BBC Sounds app. Shows include In Our Time, which was the corporation's first podcast in November 2004, and topical shows The News Quiz and The Now Show within Friday Night Comedy. Now, this ain't the BBC's first rodeo. They've previously blocked Google Podcasts altogether and pulled streams from TuneIn in the UK. Bauer has decided its live stations in the UK, Absolute Radio, Magic and Kiss, will no longer be streamable on TuneIn either, making its stations exclusive to its own apps. Listeners on services like TuneIn are already hearing pre-rolls telling them it won't work for too much longer. The BBC's plans restrict access for audiences, or in the press release's Orwellian doublespeak, gives licence fee payers even more value by bullying them into a space where the BBC can relentlessly market other shows to them and track their every move. It's another disappointing move from a broadcaster that should be widening its potential audience, not limiting it. Bauer's plans restrict access for audiences even further, and their press release is pretty clear that the only reason they're doing it is for ad targeting. Drive a Tesla, where the only streaming option is TuneIn, and you'll have to hope that you're in broadcast coverage of the radio station you want to listen to, because you'll not get it online anymore. I mean, it's up to Bauer. They're a commercial radio station, and if they feel it better to get fewer but better monetized listeners, then that's their lookout, I guess. Other broadcasters are also playing with exclusivity, but the other way round. In Norway, NRK is removing archive content from third-party platforms. Podcast episodes that are older than a year will be taken off open RSS feeds. Seems fair enough, and Radio France does something similar, but with last month's worth of episodes available on Apple Podcasts, but the rest in the Radio France app. Now, an archive plan makes sense to me. Deep archive content makes sense to make available in a curated place, and listeners wanting your archive are likely to be your preference one listeners in any case. I think there's benefit in leaving archive content available for SEO, of course, but if you're looking to drive installations of your app to those that really want it, archives seem like a good gateway. NRK and Radio France aren't alone. This American Life only posted the last 10 shows on their open RSS feed. And one of the monetization options for Answer Me This was to sell access to classic episodes on their website. A streaming radio app isn't ever downloaded by someone who just wants to trial a radio station. And I should know, by the way, because I launched the world's first one of those. No, a streaming radio app is for your preference one listeners who want a closer relationship with their favourite radio station. And in an age where radio consumption is in slow decline in many parts of the world, I would suggest that anything that removes opportunities for listeners to discover new stuff is regrettable. Now, of course, Bauer isn't that stupid. They'll still be available in the UK's Radio Player, which is a product that they've never promoted, but they clearly see some benefit from, so at least there's something there. Now, last time I wrote about news on the radio after Lisa Tarbuck last week wanted to stop the top-of-hour news in the middle of her show. For context, I link to... In fact, let's play it. Shall we play it? Let's play it. This is Lisa Tarbuck's introduction to the news on January the 22nd.
This is Radio 2. It's on the BBC Sounds app. It's on Paola's Smart Trousers and 88291.
BBC News at 7 o'clock. This is Nikki Cardwell.
I mean, you know, poorly fading down some stripper music for some reason, then shouting an incomprehensible, funny version of the station's top-of-hour positioning statement into the news bulletin so loudly that it distorts the microphone is not actually good radio. Sorry, Lisa Tarbuck. Capital M, whoever that is, tweeted a link to his blog about a radio station in South Africa, which starts a news bulletin with something positive. He writes, in 2008... When I tuned in to sample it myself, the top story was about people being thanked for their outpouring of support following wildfires. Indeed, and note that wildfires were still the top story. And Richard Horsman remembered the password for his blog. It's been 2 years. To suggest that the news isn't a nuisance, and dismissing what he describes as Pollyanna demand for positive news. He adds, "It appears to be something people like very much in opinion surveys but don't actually read or listen to in any great numbers." I would suggest to Richard that there's a definition problem here, and were we to cover positive aspects of the same stories rather than the negative, things might sound a little better. But Richard's the experienced news journalist, not me, and he also gave me my first weekday job at a radio station, for which I remain grateful. Also last week, RAJAR's figures came out, and Midas, the platform, report. Adam Bowie has done his usual forensic look at both, and as Adam points out, there's plenty of change, with mid-mornings now beating breakfast on a number of large stations. On the positive side, the UK reported its biggest ever audience. So did Commercial Radio Australia, also claiming a record commercial radio audience. Thank heavens for a growing population. Elsewhere, Jeff Vidler from Signal Hill Insights writes a piece highlighting the unique selling proposition of radio, and something I bang on about wherever I can, that of a shared experience. He highlights research which backs up the shared experience proposition and tells the story of 102.3 Now Radio in Edmonton, which has made that the core of their programming. It's worth a read. When the BBC isn't bullying listeners to download an app, it's still capable of some really good stuff. I linked to a great new campaign for Our BBC, and it's well worth a watch. It's a sublimely excellent piece of archive editing, which frankly brings a lump to the throat and a stirring of the chest. In Australia, the ABC has used Our ABC for a while, but this appears to be the first time that the BBC has used that phrasing. I also linked to some Ofcom research on BBC funding, highlighted by David Lloyd. A third of Brits have no idea how it's paid for, which is interesting, given that all Brits pay for it. In Brisbane, news talk radio station 4BC now has 3 different labels on DAB+, all pointing to the same audio. 4BC 882, 882 4BC, and Radio 4BC 882 are now all on my radio throughout the service list, and I wonder what would happen if every radio station did that. Bauer has bought Capital, a fun and massively misleading headline of mine, because they've actually bought Media Capital Radios, Portugal's biggest commercial radio company. It's nice to see Bauer getting even larger. And thank you to Dave Martin and Paul Chantler for kindly supplying the caffeine for this week's newsletter. Very excellent of you both. Thank you to Richard Hilton, James Masterton and Brun Audio Consulting for your ongoing support of this newsletter. I'm very grateful to you. And if you'd like to support my work in any way, you can buy me a coffee. Become a member to give regularly or just give a one-off coffee or 5. Buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland is where to do that. And if you're listening on a new podcast app, then you can hit the boost button now and give me some of those precious sats. What's that you say? Newpodcastapps.com is where you can learn more about those. My professional website has more details about who I am and what I do and whether I can help you further. That's at james.cridland.net. And I'm delighted to be speaking again. I'm at Podcast Movement Evolutions in Los Angeles in March, Radio Days Europe in Malmö, in Sweden in May, the podcast show in London in May, and Canadian Music Week in June. More details soon, but I'm very much looking forward to getting back on the road. And thank you very much for listening, and keep listening.